time moved differently in Lawrence prison. Ethan Carter had witnessed this shift during his 2 years of incarceration. The days blended into one another, forming an endless, dreary stretch of monotony, occasionally broken by incidents. Fights in the mess hall, new prisoners arriving, searches that felt like a routine, and once again, the same endless cycle. The dull routine became so overwhelming that at times, Ethan felt like screaming, desperate for something to break the silence. He viewed the outreach program as nothing more than a distraction, a pointless gesture by the administration to give the illusion of care. He only filled out the form because the social worker insisted. He didn't think much of it, barely reading the questions, and certainly not putting any effort into his answers. Who would want to write to a man convicted of robbery? The first letter from Sophia arrived on a Wednesday, tucked inside a plain white envelope. The handwriting was neat and unremarkable, just a polite greeting, a few questions about life, and an offer of friendship. Yet there was something in those simple lines that caught Ethan's attention. Sincerity. A kind of sincerity that was rare behind prison walls. I chose you randomly from a list, but I believe there are no accidents. Maybe we both need someone to talk to. I'm a little lonely in this huge city too. Ethan read those words 3 times, then decided to respond. He didn't know what to say. The years in prison had left his vocabulary limited to nothing but slang and prison jargon. But for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he spent the entire evening carefully crafting his response, crossing out sentences, rewriting them, thinking about every word. Thank you for your letter. I didn't expect anyone to write. Time drags like a rubber band around here, so any news from the outside is like a breath of fresh air. As he wrote, the formal tone softened, and the letters slowly became more personal. Sophia shared stories about her work as a graphic designer, her love for old movies, and her small apartment overlooking a park. Ethan began sharing memories of life before prison, dreams for the future, and fears he had never voiced to any of his cellmates. 3 months later, they were on a first-name basis. 5 months in, Ethan found himself living from letter to letter. You know, I never thought I'd say this, but sometimes I think you understand me better than anyone ever has, he wrote one evening and froze. He stared at the words, unsure of what had slipped out. He had never allowed himself such revelations before. By December, Sophia had sent a photo. Ethan studied it for a long time. She had soft brown hair that fell just above her shoulders, and her eyes shone with intelligence. The slight tilt of her head gave her a sense of vulnerability. That's me, she had written. Thought you might like to see who you've been texting with all this time. Not the best picture, but I don't have another one yet. The photo took pride of place above Ethan's bed, framed on the small wall of his cell. At first, his cellmates chuckled at the photo, but soon, their curiosity got the better of them. Who's she? They asked, eyeing the picture. Your girlfriend? Ethan, surprised by the words coming out of his mouth, nodded. Yeah, my girlfriend. And every time he said it, it felt more and more natural. As spring arrived, their letters began to change. They were filled with plans, dreams, and confessions. Sophia described what she envisioned their first meeting to be like after Ethan's release, and Ethan spoke of a dream, a lake house where they could live. I think of you every night when I fall asleep. I imagine your voice. I wonder, is it high or low? Do you speak fast or slow? Do you laugh as easily as you write? Ethan asked, his curiosity growing with every letter. In return, Sophia sent more pictures, her in different outfits, with different hairstyles, but always the same soft smile that now often appeared in his dreams. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever met. The smartest, the kindest, he wrote, no longer embarrassed by his open affection. Sophia's letters became warmer, but sometimes Ethan noticed they carried a subtle sadness. One day, she wrote, sometimes I'm afraid that when we meet, something will change, that you'll see the real me and be disappointed. Ethan didn't understand these fears. To him, Sophia had already become real, more real than the cold concrete walls that surrounded him, more real than the bars on the windows. You're the only thing keeping me afloat, he replied. Without your letters, I don't know how I'd get through this. As their connection grew, So did Ethan's hope. It was more than just letters. It was a lifeline to a world outside his cell, a glimpse of a life that was waiting for him beyond the prison walls. I would have lost my mind a long time ago if it weren't for her. The truth is, Sophia never disappointed me. She knew me better than anyone ever could. Over the summer, Ethan did something he had once thought was impossible. He proposed. In a letter he rewrote 7 times, he asked, "Will you marry me? I know it sounds crazy. I'm here, and you're there, but I need to know that we have a future, that we have a future." 2 long weeks passed, the longest stretch of time Ethan had ever endured, and finally, the response arrived. The envelope was thicker than usual. Inside was a simple silver ring on a chain, and the words he had been longing to read. Yes. 1,000 times yes. I'll wait for you as long as it takes. Ethan didn't care that their wedding was a strange, paperwork-only ceremony with no chance for even a hug. It was more real to him than any traditional wedding could have been. A month after that, they were married. Their letters became even more intimate after that day. Ethan, no longer shy, didn't hesitate to express his desires, his longing for the wife he had never been able to hold. Sophia responded warmly, but always steered the conversation away from anything physical, focusing instead on feelings, dreams, and the future. "When I get out, I'll kiss you for hours. I want to explore every inch of your body," Ethan wrote one night. "I dream of hearing your voice, feeling your hand in mine. Sometimes, I think that would be enough." Sophia replied with a tenderness that spoke volumes. "I dream of the same. But I want you to know it's not just about the physical. I want our love to be something deeper, something real beyond just touch." Then, something unexpected happened. The prison social worker, observing their unusual connection, offered to arrange a personal visit. Inmates with good behavior, particularly those who were married, were occasionally granted such opportunities. Ethan grasped the idea eagerly, like a man desperate for air. Sophia, however, responded with less enthusiasm. "I'm not sure I'm ready. Don't get me wrong, I long to see you, but it's so hard," she confessed in her letter. Ethan was confused by her hesitation. He couldn't understand why she wouldn't jump at the chance to meet after everything they'd shared. He begged, pleaded, and insisted, writing letter after letter. He drew pictures of their meeting, swore eternal love, and promised that nothing would change his feelings for her. Finally, after much persuasion, Sophia agreed. "Okay, I'll come back in a month. On the first Saturday in October. Just please remember, I'm very nervous." The weeks leading up to their meeting felt like a blur for Ethan. He counted down the days, hours, and minutes. He reread every letter Sophia had sent him, memorizing each sentence, each word. He spent hours staring at the photos she'd sent, trying to commit every detail to memory. The night before their meeting, Sophia sent one last letter. "Beloved, tomorrow I will see you for the first time. My hands are shaking as I write these lines. I have something to tell you, but I don't know how. There are some things that are hard to explain on paper. Please, no matter what happens tomorrow, remember everything I wrote about my feelings was true. Every word. I love you with all my heart. I always will." Ethan reread the letter several times, but the meaning behind it eluded him. What could Sophia have to tell him that was so difficult to express? Was she seeing someone else? Was she afraid that he wouldn't find her attractive when they finally met? These thoughts plagued his mind, but he quickly dismissed them as irrational. After everything, nothing could change how he felt about her. She had become his salvation within these walls. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining their meeting, the touch of her hands, the sound of her voice. Tomorrow he would finally see her, his Sophia, his future. The morning at Lawrence prison began as usual with a metallic clang of doors and the warden's sharp voice announcing the rise. But for Ethan, today was special. After 17 months of correspondence, he would finally meet Sophia. Kevin Harding, his cellmate, stretched out on the top bunk, grinning as he watched Ethan smooth his hair for the 3rd time in front of the tiny metal mirror. "A date with the wife?" Kevin teased. "Ready for battle, soldier?" Ethan stayed silent, but his heart was racing. Today, he would finally touch her, hear her voice, smell her scent. "Hey, relax," Kevin said, jumping off the bunk and stepping closer. "The first date after a wedding is always nerve-wracking, but remember what I told you." He lowered his voice. "If a chick comes to a man's jail cell, she's ready. They all play hard to get, but they want the same thing." Ethan shrugged, uncertain. Sophia wasn't like the women Kevin had described. She was special. She was subtle and understanding. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small doubt lingered. For 17 long months, Ethan had dreamed of her. He had imagined their intimacy countless times and written about his desires in letters, pouring out his heart and longing. Wasn't it natural that today, those dreams would finally come true? "Got a room for intimate visits, don't you?" Kevin persisted, his grin mischievous. "Consider yourself lucky. The bed's like a cheap motel bed, but it's better than the iron table in the common room." During breakfast in the dining hall, the noise from the other prisoners only grew louder. Johnny, sitting across from Ethan, was laughing boisterously, making exaggerated pelvic movements as if demonstrating intercourse. "Show her who's boss," Carter shouted from another table, a laugh echoing through the room. "You bet," another prisoner added. "After so many months without a woman, I wouldn't let her out of bed." Ethan tried to force a smile, to join in the joke. But inside, a strange tension began to build. On one hand, these guys were right. He was hungry for intimacy, for the warmth of a woman. On the other hand, he didn't want their first meeting to be just about satisfying that physical hunger. He wanted it to be special, something deep and meaningful, not just a raw, desperate release. "Listen carefully, Carter." Kevin leaned in closer before they were escorted back to their cells. "Don't let her lead. This is your territory, your rules. If she starts a break, take what's yours. She'll thank you later for being a man, not a slobbering puppy." Ethan nodded, partly to avoid the conversation, but also because Kevin's words stirred something primal inside him. Something that felt like it had been dormant for too long. But he wasn't sure if that was the direction he wanted to take. 100 miles away from Lawrence Prison, Sophia stood before the mirror in a cramped bathroom, her fingers trembling as she buttoned up her pale blue blouse. Her face, framed by her brown hair, looked drained, pale, and conflicted. "He'll understand," Sophia whispered to her reflection. "He has to understand. After all, he loves me, not my body. Me." But despite her reassuring words, the fear lingered. 17 months of love, trust, and hope, and it could all come crashing down today. She should have told him sooner. At first, it seemed like their correspondence was just innocent texting, nothing serious. Then, unexpectedly, feelings began to develop, strong and undeniable. And by then, it was too late. How could she explain what had grown between them in just letters? What she could barely explain in person. Sophia touched the silver ring around her neck, the one hanging from a chain. It was their ring, the symbol of a promise, but she wasn't sure if she could keep it. "Honey, you're going to be late," her mother's voice interrupted, pulling Sophia back to the present. "I'm on my way, Mom." The drive to the prison was quiet. Sophia's mother, Eleanor, was silent behind the wheel, only occasionally glancing at her daughter with concern. Finally, after some time, Eleanor asked, "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to turn back." Sophia shook her head. "I have to see him. I have to try to explain. He deserves the truth. And if he doesn't understand, then I'll have to live with it." The view of Lawrence Prison didn't surprise her. The gray, squat building, enclosed behind high fences, looked exactly as she'd imagined. Cold, impassable, and hostile. "I'll wait for you here," Eleanor said, pulling into the parking lot. "I love you, no matter what happens." The visitor registration process was humiliating. Sophia had to go through the usual checks, IDs, forms, and searches. The security officer, a middle-aged man with an indifferent face, scanned her ID card, then looked at her, giving a subtle nod. Looks a little different," he remarked. "Yeah, I changed my hair," Sophia replied, trying to make her voice sound casual, higher than usual. The officer shrugged and stamped her form. But the body search officer was more thorough. Her hand paused briefly when she detected a medical bandage under Sophia's clothes. "I have a certificate," Sophia explained quietly. The officer nodded, but Sophia noticed something like understanding in her eyes as she passed her through. Feeling her cheeks flush, Sophia turned away, feeling exposed. Finally, she walked down a long hallway, another check, and then the door to the visiting wing. Ray Donovan, the warden, greeted her with a sour expression, taking her by the elbow. "First time with us?" he asked in a mocking tone. Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. "The intimate visiting room is right down the hall. Do you know the rules?" Donovan continued, grinning. Sophia nodded again, unsure what to say. "You have 2 hours," Donovan added. "There's a call button inside, but use it only in emergencies. There are no cameras in the room, so feel free." He chuckled as he finished, and Sophia felt a cold chill run down her spine. The room looked almost like something out of a cheap motel: a double bed, a small table, and 2 chairs. Sophia stood still, not knowing what to expect. She didn't want to rush this moment, but the anticipation was almost too much to bear. This was it. After 17 months of letters, of longing, of dreaming, she was about to meet Ethan. Would he understand? Would he still love her, despite everything she hadn't been able to say? Would they both find what they were looking for? A tray of cookies and a thermos sat quietly on the table. "Your husband will be here in a minute," Donovan said before leaving her alone. The door clicked shut behind him, and Sophia pressed her hand to her chest, trying to calm the racing of her heart. "It's not too late," she whispered to herself. She could explain everything. Ethan would understand. He had to understand. The click of the lock startled her, and the door opened. There he was, Ethan, her husband, the man she knew intimately through letters, down to the smallest detail of his soul, but had never seen in person. He stood taller than she had imagined from the photos. His shoulders were broader, his prison robe hanging loosely on his sturdy frame. His eyes, the same eyes from the countless pictures she'd spent hours studying, now locked onto hers with such adoration that it took her breath away. "Sophia," he said, and the name sounded like prayer. For a moment, they stood motionless, separated by just a few steps and the weight of 17 months of waiting. Then, Ethan took a step forward, then another. Before Sophia could breathe, his arms were around her shoulders. "Finally," he whispered, "you're finally here." Sophia let herself melt into his arms, feeling his scent, a mixture of cheap soap and something deeply masculine, envelop her. His heartbeat next to hers was all she could focus on. In that moment, she forgot the fear, the mystery, and the inevitable conversation that loomed over them. She had waited so long for this. Ethan pulled back to look into her face, his eyes soft and full of warmth. "You're even more beautiful than in the pictures." His lips found hers gently, almost chastely at first, but then, with growing confidence, more insistently. His hand slid down her back, pulling her closer. "Ethan," Sophia pulled away gently, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to talk." He kissed her again, this time with more passion, more urgency. "We have so little time," he said, breathless, his hands trailing down her back, into her hair, and lower, finding her thighs. Sophia could feel his desire, his impatience, his hunger. Instinctively, she took a step back. "Please, Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling. "It's important." He stopped, breathing heavily, his eyes clouded with desire. "What is it, love? Is something wrong?" Sophia took a deep breath. Now she had to say it. "Yeah," she said, her voice steady but low. "There's something you don't know about me." Ethan frowned, confusion quickly overtaking him. "Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I love you." He reached for her again, but Sophia took another step back. "It does matter, Ethan," she said firmly, her voice shaking. "It matters a lot." The words felt stuck in her throat. "I'm not exactly who you think I am." Ethan's face twisted with irritation. "What are you talking about? You're my wife, the woman I've been corresponding with for a year and a half. What else do I need to know?" Sophia wrapped her arms around herself, instinctively shielding her heart. "I was born different," she said quietly. "I'm in transition, Ethan. I haven't finished it. Transition." The confusion on Ethan's face turned into utter bewilderment. What are you talking about? Sophia closed her eyes, gathering the courage to say it aloud. I'm transgender, Ethan. I was born in a man's body. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stared at her, as though she was speaking a foreign language. Is this some kind of joke? He asked finally, his voice thick with disbelief. Because it's not funny. It's not a joke. Sophia's voice trembled, her hands shaking. I wanted to tell you before, but I didn't know how. I was afraid of losing you. Ethan shook his head, as if trying to shake off the words she had just spoken. No. This is impossible. I've seen pictures of you. You're a woman. Sophia took a step toward him, holding out her hand. On the outside, yes. He recoiled from her touch, his eyes wide. What are you saying? Sophia's heart broke. It's still me, Ethan. The same Sophia who's been writing to you all these months, who loves you, loves me. Ethan made a sound, something between a chuckle and a scoff, but it was without any trace of humor. You lied to me. The word struck Sophia like a slap. She had never expected him to react like this, but she had feared it. I never lied to you, she said softly, her voice breaking. I've always been who I am, Ethan. I just couldn't say it before. Ethan stood frozen, his face twisted in disbelief and disgust. So, you're saying you've had surgery? He finally managed, his words faltering as he recoiled even more. Sophia nodded, tears filling her eyes. Yes, Ethan. I've been on hormone therapy for a long time. My breasts have developed. My skin has changed. My features have changed. I've had gender reassignment surgery. Ethan took a step back, his face contorted with disgust. I don't know who you are anymore, he muttered. Sophia stood there, her heart breaking as she stared at the man she loved. The man who had just moments before kissed her like he had waited forever. But now, she was nothing more than a stranger to him. A lie. Please, Ethan, Sophia whispered, her voice filled with pain. Try to understand. A tray of cookies and a thermos sat untouched on the table, a quiet testament to the tense atmosphere in the room. For a year and a half, you forced me to marry you. Ethan's voice trembled with rage. His face twisted in disgust as he stared at her. Do you know what I had to listen to from the guys? Do you have any idea how jealous they were that I had a beautiful wife coming over? Ethan, Sophia tried to speak, but he cut her off. Shut up. He slammed his fist onto the table. Just shut up. I don't want to hear your voice. I don't want to see your face. You're a sick freak, and you've ruined my life. Sophia gasped as if the words struck her physically. She felt a sharp pain, and tears ran freely down her cheeks, though she didn't bother to wipe them away. I know it's a shock, she whispered, her voice shaky. It hasn't been easy for me either. But Ethan, if we love each other... Love. His voice was filled with venom as he almost spat the word. I loved a woman. A real woman. Not this. He waved his hand dismissively at her, as if trying to expel her from his view. I'm a real woman, Sophia said quietly, her voice low but firm. Inside, in the ways that matter. For a fleeting moment, Ethan's gaze faltered. There was something like doubt in his eyes, but it quickly hardened into contempt. Prove it, he demanded. Prove what? Prove that you're a woman. He stepped toward her, his face contorted with rage, but also something else, something Sophia couldn't quite read. If you're my wife, then we should have a wedding night, he spat, his words sharp. Isn't that why you came here? No. Sophia shook her head, stepping back from the wall. Not like this. Not now. We need to talk. We need to work things out. Talk, he laughed bitterly. For a year and a half, I've been talking to you, writing to you, dreaming about you. No more talking. His hand reached out and squeezed her wrist with such force that Sophia cried out in pain. Please don't, she whispered, voice trembling. You're hurting me. Aren't you hurting me? He growled, yanking her toward him. You come here, make me believe I have a wife, a real wife, and then you say this. Kevin's words rang in Ethan's ears like a brutal echo. If you came here, you're ready. They all break down, but they really want the same thing, be a man. Take what's yours. I don't believe you, Ethan whispered, pulling Sophia to him. Prove it. Prove you're not a woman. His lips pressed roughly against hers, and his hands moved aggressively, squeezing her breasts through the fabric of her blouse. Sophia struggled beneath him, but he was stronger, much stronger. "Ethan, stop," she gasped, trying to pull away. But he wasn't listening anymore. With a fierce shove, he pushed her onto the bed, his body pinning hers. His knees spread her legs, and he pressed himself against her. "No!" Sophia screamed, wriggling beneath him, desperate to get free. "Ethan, please, don't do this." Something in her voice, her desperate resistance, made him pause for a split second. He looked into her tear-streaked face, his grip loosening. "Sophia," he murmured. She used that precious moment to free one of her hands. But instead of shoving him away, she reached up and gently touched his face. "Please, Ethan," she begged, her voice quiet and full of pain. "Not like this. Not here. If you really love me, not like this." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, softness, hesitation, but it was quickly replaced by hardness again. "If I love you," he said bitterly, "you've been lying to me for years." His hand moved to the zipper of her pants. Sophia's body twisted under him, her heart pounding with fear. "Ethan, please don't." She struggled, desperate to stop him, to make him understand. His hand slid under the waistband of her underwear, and then it froze. Shock registered on his face. Disbelief, fury, and something worse, disgust. "Oh God," he whispered, pulling his hand away as if burned. "It's true." Sophia lay still, her body tense, staring into his face. The love they had shared, the connection they once had, seemed to vanish in an instant. Ethan's eyes shifted from confusion to rage, and for the first time, Sophia realized what this moment was, the death of everything they had built together. He stood up, staggering away from her. Shut up," he hissed, rolling off her, his voice filled with disgust. "Just shut up." He stood in the middle of the room, breathing heavily, his eyes glaring at her as if she were a complete stranger, something repulsive. Sophia slowly sat up on the bed, feeling the coldness between them grow unbearable. She looked at him, but there was nothing she could say. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted, was now looking at her as if she were nothing more than an alien, someone unrecognizable. She whispered, barely audible, "Ethan, please try to understand," trying to cover herself with the torn blouse. Sophia looked at Ethan with a trembling heart. "You broke everything," he whispered, his voice heavy with so much pain that Sophia flinched, as if the words had struck her physically. "Everything I had, everything I dreamed of. We can fix this," she said quietly, almost pleading. "Together, if you give us a chance." Ethan shook his head, and Sophia could see something in his eyes that made her cringe against the wall. "No," he muttered. "This can't be fixed." The silence between them thickened, settling in the room like the oppressive stillness before a thunderstorm. Ethan stood there, clenching and unclenching his fists, his mind struggling to grasp the reality that had just been thrust upon him. His thoughts were in turmoil, refusing to accept the situation. All those months, all those letters, all those dreams, was it all a lie? "You're not even a woman," Ethan said hoarsely, staring at Sophia, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, trying to cover herself with the torn blouse. "You're a man. You've been a man all this time." "No, Ethan," Sophia's voice trembled. "I've always been a woman. I was just born in the wrong body." "Yeah, shut up." Ethan slammed his fist into the wall, his frustration and rage flaring up with a force that made him feel numb to the pain. "No more lies. I saw it. I felt it." He couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence, his mind overwhelmed by the shock that was turning into something darker. Humiliation, betrayal. His entire world had been shattered. The entire prison knew about his wife coming to see him. Kevin, Johnny, everyone else. They had all envied him, respected him for having a beautiful woman waiting for him. And now, Ethan was left with nothing but the bitter sting of their laughter. Scenes flashed before his eyes. The mocking faces of his cellmates, the snide comments, the cruel jokes. "Hey, Carter, how's your wife?" someone would joke. "Carter is on the boys' side now. F*********. You destroyed me." Ethan whispered, his voice eerily calm. Do you realize what you've done? Sophia slowly stood up, keeping her distance from him. Ethan, I know you're shocked right now, but nothing has changed. I'm still the same Sophia who wrote to you, who loves you. All those feelings were real. Ethan took a step toward her, and Sophia instinctively backed away. You call that real? You're not real. You're fake. His voice rose with anger as years of prison life, repressed aggression, the fear of appearing weak, all of it boiled over inside him, searching for an outlet. For 17 months, he had dreamed of this moment. Every night, lying in his cell, he imagined embracing his wife, kissing her, making love to her. He had been the envy of the other prisoners. He was special, not just a man serving time, but a man with a future, with hope. But now, it had all been an illusion. I thought you were saving me, Ethan said, his voice breaking. And you were just using me for your sick game. No, Ethan, that's not true, Sophia whispered, stepping toward him and holding out her hand. I never meant to hurt you. I fell in love with you through your letters, your soul, your mind, your hopes. Don't touch me, Ethan shouted, recoiling. Did you think I'd never find out? That I'd never get out of prison, or that I'd be so desperate for any attention that I'd accept this? Sophia lowered her hand, her tears streaming down her face. I knew I had to tell you. I was going to, but I was afraid of losing you. You became everything to me, the only person who understood me, accepted me for who I was. I didn't accept you, Ethan growled. I didn't know you. If I had, I never would have written a single line. The word struck Sophia harder than a physical blow. She staggered, as if in pain, her heart breaking under the weight of his rejection. You can't think like that. After all we've been through together, Ethan laughed bitterly. What? You lived your life sending me pretty pictures and sweet letters, while I was rotting here in these walls, clinging to false hope. You were having fun at my expense. That's not true. Sophia's eyes begged for understanding. Ethan, I love you. Everything I wrote is true. Every word. It's still me, the same soul, the same thoughts, the same feelings. Just the body, just the body. Just the body? Ethan echoed, and something in his eyes shifted, something cold and distant. For you, it's just a body. And for me, he didn't finish the sentence. His gaze went blank, detached, and Sophia felt a chill spreading in her chest. At that moment, he looked unfamiliar, like a stranger. The person she had been corresponding with for all those months was gone, replaced by someone else. Let's just talk, Sophia said, her voice pleading as she took a cautious step toward him. Ethan, I know you're hurting. I am too. But if we love each other, love. He looked through her, as if she were invisible. I love the woman in the letters. The woman in the pictures, a real woman. And in that instant, Sophia knew that everything had changed. The person she had loved, the person she had hoped to build a future with, was now lost to her. The reality of the situation crashed over her, leaving her with nothing but a sense of overwhelming emptiness. I'm sorry, she whispered, her heart heavy with the weight of her own loss. I'm so sorry. Trying to cover herself with her torn blouse, Sophia desperately reached out for the man she loved. I'm not a freak, she said, her voice trembling with vulnerability. The word freak sliced through her like a knife. She flinched but kept talking, pleading for him to understand, desperate to reach the Ethan she knew. Please don't say that, she begged. I know this is a shock. I know you feel cheated, but we can get through this together. In time, you'll realize that You can't deal with this, Ethan interrupted, his voice uncharacteristically calm, like he was accepting a painful truth. When I walk out of here, everyone will know. Everyone will laugh. Carter, the one who married a man. He paused, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. I'll be a laughingstock. I won't be able to live with myself. No one will know, Sophia said quickly, her voice shaking with urgency. It's just between us. We could get a quiet divorce if you want. I'll disappear from her life. No one will ever know. Ethan looked at her, but it was as if he hadn't heard a word she said. his face twisted with pain and frustration, and Sophia could see the internal struggle tearing him apart. "You ruined my life," he whispered. And then, in an instant, all of the tension, all of the shock, and all of the humiliation he had been holding inside exploded in one wild, uncontrollable outburst of rage. He lunged at Sophia with such speed that she didn't have time to cry out. His hands closed around her throat with a strength that felt unnatural, squeezing with a fury that left her gasping for air. "You ruined my life," he shouted through gritted teeth, tightening his grip with each word. Sophia's hands clawed at his wrists, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. She couldn't breathe. Her vision began to blur, and only weak, desperate gasps escaped her throat. A small part of Ethan inside screamed that this was madness, that it had to stop, that this rage wasn't him. But that part of him was buried under an avalanche of humiliation, anger, and despair. The frustration of years of confinement, of being imprisoned both physically and emotionally, had finally burst through. Sophia's resistance was fading. Her body grew weaker and weaker, and her eyes, full of pain and incomprehension, still locked with his. There was no hatred in them, only pain, only love. This made Ethan even more furious. How could she still look at him like that? How dare she pretend to be loving when everything was a lie, a deception? He couldn't remember how much time had passed, seconds, minutes. His hands continued to squeeze, even when Sophia's body went limp. When her eyes rolled back and she stopped moving, his grip didn't loosen until his own hands began to shake from the effort. Only then did he recoil, stepping back from her body as if it wasn't real. Sophia fell to the floor like a broken doll. Her eyes were open, staring into nothingness. The darkening bruises from Ethan's fingers were visible on her neck. It was then that the full weight of what had just happened began to sink into Ethan's mind. He had killed Sophia, the woman he had loved, the man who had written him letters, whose pictures he had kissed every night before sleep. "No," he whispered, falling to his knees beside her body. "No, no, no." His hands hovered over her face, still warm but lifeless. He tried to feel for a pulse on the neck he had just gripped so tightly, but there was nothing. He shook her shoulders as if that could bring her back to life. "Sophia," he called out, his voice cracking. "Sophia, wake up. Please wake up." But there was no answer, only silence. The silence of the irrevocable truth. He had killed her. Ethan didn't remember pressing the call button. He didn't recall the wardens coming in, pulling him away from the body, or the handcuffs snapping around his wrists. Everything was a blur. He vaguely heard voices around him. Ray Donovan, speaking with cold disinterest. Found out the wife was actually a man. "Huh? Tough kid," Donovan said. Then the warden barked something about press problems, and medics confirmed death by asphyxiation. The whole process seemed strangely indifferent. No one showed shock or regret. Murder in prison was commonplace, and the fact that it happened in the visiting room was just an inconvenience to the administration. Ethan was taken to an isolation cell, a small, windowless room with bare concrete walls. It was there in complete silence that the reality of what he had done finally caught up with him. He had killed Sophia, the man he loved, the woman who had loved him. Her last words echoed in his mind. "I know you're hurting. I'm hurting too. But if we love each other..." He remembered her eyes, full of pain, but not hatred. She had tried to reach him, the real Ethan she knew through their letters. But he couldn't hear her. He had destroyed it all. He had destroyed her. And now, sitting alone in that cold cell, he had no one left. No one but the empty walls around him and the weight of his actions. He had taken the life of the one person who had believed in him, who had seen beyond his prison walls, and he couldn't take it back. The silence in the cell was suffocating. The full weight of his actions pressed down on him, and the man he had been, filled with dreams and hope, seemed like a distant memory. All that remained was guilt, and the knowledge that he had killed Sophia. In a way, he was the fake, the real Ethan, the one who had written tender letters, shared his dreams, and promised eternal love, had disappeared the moment the truth came to light. In his place stood a cruel, frightened man who could not accept the reality he was faced with. Sitting alone in the detention center, Ethan tried to understand what had happened. Why had he reacted the way he did? Was it the prison, which had turned him into something less than human? Was it the fear of ridicule from the other inmates? Or his own prejudices that had become stronger than the love he once felt? He didn't know. All he knew was that he had lost something irreplaceable, the chance to be loved and understood for who he truly was. Sophia had offered him that, and now it was gone. Eleanor Morgan sat in the waiting room of Lawrence Prison, her mind clouded with worry. She had been waiting for over 3 hours, longer than expected. The visit was supposed to end at 3 p.m., but Sophia still hadn't emerged. The staff's responses were vague, offering only the reassurance that everything was fine and that she would be contacted soon. But as the minutes stretched on, Eleanor's anxiety grew. When a uniformed man finally approached her, she already knew something was wrong. "Mrs. Morgan," the officer said, his face stern and lacking any hint of sympathy. "I need you to identify the body." Eleanor's heart dropped. The words didn't register at first, but the finality of them hit her like a cold wave. She followed the officer in silence, knowing she had just lost her daughter in the most horrific way possible. The formalities were cold and emotionless. The paperwork, the signatures, the procedures, it all felt shockingly similar to the bureaucracy of life. As if everything that was sacred, that was personal, had been reduced to a set of impersonal forms. Sophia's body wasn't released until a week later. Eleanor organized a modest funeral. Only a few people attended, relatives, a couple of friends who had accepted Sophia for who she truly was. But it didn't matter. The silence was unbearable, and Eleanor's heart felt hollow. At home, while sorting through her daughter's things, Eleanor found a box of letters from Ethan. Hundreds of them, all neatly tied with ribbons and signed with dates. She didn't want to read them. They were too personal, too painful. But something compelled her to pick up the top letter from the last stack. "My favorite Sophia," it began. "I can't wait for us to meet. Only 2 days left. I imagine seeing you for the first time, hearing your voice, touching your hand. You know, I can't stop thinking about what you wrote in your last letter. The fear that something will change when we meet. Nothing will change. The way I feel about you, nothing will. I fell in love with you for your soul, your thoughts, your caring, the way you understand me, the way you accept me with all my imperfections. Whatever you are, I will love you always." Tears blurred Eleanor's vision as she set the letter aside. She picked up another, then another, and another. Each letter was filled with such tenderness, such understanding, and acceptance that it was impossible to believe that the man who had written them was capable of such cruelty. Then, Eleanor found a draft of Sophia's final letter, the one she had never sent. "My love, I have been gathering my courage to write this letter for so long. I should have done a long time ago. From the beginning, I didn't think our correspondence would become anything serious. And then, when I realized I was falling in love with you, it became too scary to risk what we had. I'm not exactly who you think I am. I was born a boy. All my life, I knew it was a mistake to be trapped in a man's body with a woman's soul. For the last few years, I've been living as a woman. I take hormones. I've changed my appearance, but I haven't undergone full sex reassignment surgery yet. I realize this may come as a shock to you. Maybe it'll change the way you feel about me. If it does, I understand. But I had to tell you the truth. You deserve it. No one thing. Everything I wrote to you, everything I said about how I felt was true. I love you with all my heart, and I will love you no matter what happens. Yours, Sophia." Eleanor clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Two truly loving souls. Two people who could have given each other so much. And it was all destroyed in one moment of fear, misunderstanding, and prejudice. She looked at the picture of Sophia on the table. Sophia was smiling at the camera, full of hope for the future. A future that would never happen now. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Eleanor whispered. "I should have protected you." But she knew that no one could protect Sophia. Not from a world too cruel to those who were different, nor from a love too strong to give up, even knowing the risks. In the isolation cell at Lawrence Prison, Ethan Carter sat with his back against the cold wall. In his hands, he held the last picture of Sophia, the only thing he was left with. The man who had once dreamed of a future with her, a future that now seemed so distant and unattainable, was drowning in guilt. He had destroyed everything. He had destroyed her. As the prison walls closed in around him, Ethan could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him. There was no escape from it, no way to undo the damage he had caused. And as the minutes stretched on, all he could think about was the life they could have had, one that would never be. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the image of Sophia, her loving, understanding eyes, remained. A reminder of the woman he had lost. He stared at the smiling face in the photograph, struggling to comprehend how love, once so pure and sincere, could twist into hate and violence so swiftly. There was no answer, only silence and the harsh truth that some things are beyond repair. Some wounds run too deep, and once certain illusions are shattered, there's no hope for recovery. Turning the photograph over, he saw the familiar handwriting. Love you just the way you are. Forever yours, Sophia. Ethan closed his eyes. Too late,